Welcome to the Redefine Podcast. Okay, happy podcast day. Happy podcast day to you. Welcome to the show. If you are brand new, and of course, if you are an existing listener and or viewer, welcome back. Welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, so this week we're going to talk about guarding our headspace. It's actually a little bit of a continuation from last week's episode when we talked about motivation and how this time of year typically we need to reinvigorate ourselves because we can start to feel like we're losing steam, right? We set goals at the beginning of the year, New Year's resolutions, new visions for ourselves that we want to achieve this year. And, a couple months into the year, it starts to get tiring. It starts to feel like a slog. And so it's really important to reinvigorate and remotivate. One of the practices that we talked about last week was revisiting your goals and visions on a daily basis, right? Reminding yourself of the things that you're trying to achieve and why you want to achieve those things. And so, the conversation for today will expand on that in that it really is incredibly important that we guard what's going on in our headspace, right? We guard the input of what's going on in our headspace because that can distract from focusing on the things that we want to achieve, right? And so part of guarding that headspace is being intentional with what goes in. We're going to talk about this and expand on this in today's episode. But before we get into it, I do want to ask you a few quick favors. If you're not already following or subscribed to the show, go ahead and follow or subscribe. That's actually the most helpful thing you could do to help us grow this show so that these messages and these principles can get out to more people. And then number two, the second most helpful thing you can do is share it, right? If you know just one person who you might think would enjoy and appreciate this content, just smash that share button. It takes 3 to 5 seconds. Send it off with a quick message. And again, that's one more person that we can help here with the Redefine podcast. Okay, so getting into the main subject, guarding your headspace, really, really important. Why is this important? Because it just everything stems from upstairs, right? It stems from what goes in your CPU. I'm sure you've heard what goes in is what comes out, right? If you fill your head with junk ideas, you're gonna get junk results in return. Right. It's like, if you think about it like a computer CPU, it's exactly the same thing. If you fill it up, if you bog it down with a bunch of useless information, bunch of useless data, apps and programs, then it's not going to run as smoothly as possible. And it's not going to give you the outputs that you currently desire. Certainly not the outputs. Certainly not in the time that you want to produce those outputs. So the brain and the mind works the same way. This idea popped in my head the other day because I listened to a lot of science podcasts, and also recently I revisited the movie Interstellar. So, a lot of kind of mind expanding things that I've exposed myself to the last this past week. And this thought popped in my mind that our reality really is just our perception. Right? How we experience reality, how we experience life really is our perception. It's all how we perceive things. No matter how much you work on coming into a situation or a circumstance with neutrality, there's still going to be some degree of bias or some degree of programming, old history, unconscious even, that's going to influence how you perceive that, right? How you interpret that reality that you're experiencing. And so because of this, it's really important to again, guard the headspace and guard what information is going through. Perception is everything. Perception is everything. That's also why, we can have 20 people standing on a street corner waiting to cross the street. They all witness a fender bender or a small car accident, and you'll have 20 different experiences, right? 20 different realities, perceived realities, because everybody's reality is just their perception, right? So reality is just your perception, and this is not a discussion on whether or not there is objective reality. Of course, there's objective reality. I'm not going to get into talking about whether whether, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's there to hear it, does it really make a sound? Yeah, I think we can all agree that objective reality, that that tree made some sort of noise. It just depends on who's there to interpret and perceive that noise, right? So let's just assume that there is objective reality. Given that there's objective reality, then all of that objective reality, all of that information and data and stimuli that's happening outside of us, independent of us, still has to go through our internal filters, like we talked about last week. We have external circumstances and situations that have to go through our internal filters, and that then motivate us and spring us into action. Same thing with any stimuli; it has to go through internal filters, right? It has to go through our interpretations, and then we create the narratives, the definitions. Ultimately, we assign meaning to that external reality, that objective reality. We assign meanings to all that raw data that's coming in through our senses. Now, of course, a lot of that is happening in real time unconsciously, but it's happening nonetheless, right? It's all being filtered through the programming that we have in our CPU. So the sum total of all these assigned meanings and narratives and definitions that we create around all the stimuli and the objective reality that's happening around us then becomes our perceived experience. It becomes, i.e., our realities. How we define the objective reality around us and the meanings we assign to those things and narratives we create around those things is determined then by the programming that we have in our CPU, in our brains, in our minds. Yes, our CPUs do come pre-installed with some programming, but it also incorporates new programming as we go through life by the things that we go through, our experiences, by the people that are around us, the influences that we have through our lives, and of course the information that we allow into our headspace. So we're actually simultaneously interpreting and creating definitions and meanings with all the data that's coming in, and then using all of that information to build programs in our CPU. A problem then arises when we're not intentional and purposeful with what we're letting into the headspace, right? With the data, with the stimuli, with the ideas and the information. We live in an overstimulated world with too much information and so much distraction. All of that stimuli is coming into our spheres, and our brains not only have to interpret it, but it incorporates it into our base programming at the same time. So if you spend too much time doom scrolling and being distracted by the internet, then you're going to have a distracted perception of reality. If you're giving too much attention to ideas and individuals that really serve no purpose in helping you achieve the things that you want to achieve, then you're not going to achieve the things that you want to achieve. And those ideas and those individuals are going to start to take a front seat, maybe even a driver's seat in your perceived reality. So this is why it's so important to guard your headspace and be more intentional and purposeful with what you're exposing yourself to, the stimuli, the ideas, the data, the information, the objective reality that's outside of you. Really, really be picky and choosy with what you expose yourself to, because the things you expose yourself to are going to determine how you perceive reality. So in order to be the captain of your own ship, the captain of your own journey, you have to be the captain of the information that you're exposing yourself to, the ideas, the stimuli that you're exposing yourself to. That's what it means to guard your headspace. And so going back to last week's episode, revisit your goals and your visions every day, right? Remind yourself of these things. Remind yourself of what you want to achieve. Again, it could be big or small, and it could be, it could range from any aspect of life, health, finances, relationships, whatever you want to change, whatever you want to achieve. Remind yourself of that every day, and remind yourself why that's important to you. And then treat everything else that doesn't align with that as distraction. And eventually you'll experience and perceive the reality that you've always wanted to experience and perceive. There's some really good books that you can read that expand on all of this, expand on these ideas, some classics really. One of them is called As a Man Thinketh, right? That is a classic. As a Man Thinketh, so shall he be. And another one is called The Alchemist. I'll leave a link to both of those books in the show notes of this episode or in the description of the YouTube. But if you haven't read those two, check them out. Click on those links. That would really help us out a lot on this show as well. And yeah, really start taking more control of the information and the things that you're exposing yourself to, the people, the influences that you're exposing yourself to, because that will influence the programming in the CPU, right? And the programming in the CPU will then determine your output. It will determine the reality that you create and that you perceive for yourself. All right, so that's going to do it for this week's episode. Thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions or comments, please leave a comment in the comment section below of the video version of this, or leave me a rating and a review wherever ratings and reviews are possible. You can also hit the send me a text on the podcast if you have anything that you'd like to discuss or any questions that you'd like to run by me. I'm always happy to receive those. Beyond that, have a great rest of your week. Have a great weekend. We'll catch you next week with a fresh new one. So until then, be well, be safe. We'll see you in the next episode.